Most hikers are afraid of getting lost, or falling, or running into a wild animal somewhere deep in the woods. But the people in these stories were afraid of something else, something they could hear following them through the trees, something that stayed just far enough away, never to be fully seen. And the worst part is this: none of them ever figured out what it actually was. Ethan Mercer loved hiking alone. Quiet trails helped him clear his head after work. So during a trip to South Dakota, he decided to hike near Black Elk Peak in late October. Tourist season is basically over. The trails were almost empty, exactly how he liked them. For the first hour, everything felt normal. Cold wind moved through the pine trees, while dead needles cracked softly beneath his boots. Then the forest went silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. That was when Ethan heard the whistle. Short, sharp. Humans. He stopped immediately and looked uphill between the trees. Nobody was there. A few seconds later, he kept walking. Then came footsteps behind him. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Slow, perfectly matching his pace. Ethan turned around. Nothing. The trail behind him was empty. But every time he started walking again, the footsteps returned, closer each time. The deeper he moved into the woods, the stranger things became. Several piles of animal bones sat near the trail, carefully arranged, almost like decorations. Then Ethan noticed someone standing ahead between the trees. Tall, thin, motionless. He called out. No answer. The figure slowly stepped behind a tree and disappeared completely. That was enough for Ethan. He turned around and started hiking back down the trail. Then he noticed footprints beside him in the mud, bare human footprints, fresh, keeping pace with him through the trees. Panic finally hit him. Branches snapped nearby. Heavy movement crashed through the woods beside the trail. Whatever was following him no longer cared about staying hidden. Then suddenly, silence. Ethan slowed carefully and heard breathing behind him. Not human breathing. Wet, deep, slow. He turned around. Nothing stood on the trail, but high above him, balanced across a fallen tree, something pale crouched silently in the darkness. Its arms looked too long. Its face looked smooth, blank. Ethan ran. He later said he could hear it moving through the trees above him the entire way back to the parking lot, keeping pace, never falling behind. When he finally reached his car, muddy fingerprints stretched across the driver's side door. Long fingerprints, far too long to belong to a human hand. Torres almost canceled her hiking trip to Oregon after her boyfriend backed out at the last second. But she already booked the cabin, so she went alone. The trail near Mount Hood looked beautiful that morning. Fog drifted between enormous pine trees, while wet leaves covered the ground. At first, the atmosphere felt peaceful. Then Maya started noticing movement between the trees, quick flashes, dark shapes disappearing into the fog. About an hour into the hike, she heard someone call her name. Maya. She froze instantly. The voice sounded exactly like her boyfriend's. Same tone, same voice. She turned around. Nobody stood behind her. Then the voice came again, closer. Maya. Cold fear moved through her chest, because the voice sounded almost human, almost perfect, like something trying to imitate a real person. Maya hurried deeper down the trail. Then she noticed footprints crossing the mud ahead, bare human footprints, fresh. A few minutes later, she found an old wooden bench in a clearing. Words had been carved deeply into the wood. Don't answer it. Then she heard crying somewhere in the fog. A woman begging for help. The sound felt terrifyingly real, but every instinct told Maya not to leave the trail. Suddenly, the crying stopped. Dead silence filled the clearing. Then a voice whispered behind her. She looked too. Maya turned slowly. A woman stood near the trees. At least it looked like a woman. Long dark hair covered most of its face. One arm hung unnaturally low beside its body, and it was copying Maya's movements perfectly, like a reflection. The fog shifted slightly. For one terrible second, Maya saw its face. No eyes, only black holes, and a smile stretched impossibly wide across its face. Maya ran. Branches clawed against her jacket while the voice followed her through the fog. Maya, Maya, Maya. Finally, she spotted a wooden bridge ahead. A park ranger stood at the opposite end. Relief hit instantly. "You all right out here?" the ranger asked calmly. Maya nodded quickly. "I think something's following me." The ranger tilted his head slightly. "You hear voices?" Something about the question felt wrong. Then Maya noticed his uniform. Old, faded, water-stained. And his face? His face looked blurry somehow, like her brain was refusing to process it, like something was stopping her from seeing it clearly. Then the ranger smiled. "Maya." Same voice again, perfectly identical. Behind him, tall figures slowly appeared through the fog between the trees, watching her silently. Maya turned and ran into the woods instead of crossing the bridge. Hours later, search teams found her wandering beside a highway nearly 7 miles away, barefoot, crying uncontrollably. The only thing she said afterward was, "They knew my voice before they knew my name." Daniel Reeves was an experienced backpacker, former military, not someone who scares easily. During a solo hike along the Appalachian Trail, he decided to spend the night near an abandoned fire tower deep in the mountains. That first night, Daniel woke at exactly 2:13 in the morning, not because of noise, because of silence, absolute silence. Then he heard footsteps circling his tent outside, slow, measured, crunching softly through dead leaves. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. Nothing, but surrounding the tent were hundreds of bare human footprints in the dirt. Daniel packed immediately at sunrise and continued hiking toward the fire tower. Snow started falling by evening. The tower stood alone above the forest, rusting. Silent, Daniel climbed to the top platform and settled there for the night. Hours later, metal stairs creaked beneath him. Somebody was climbing upward. Slowly. Clang, clang, clang. Then a woman's voice drifted up from below. "Please help me." Daniel frowned. Nobody should have been out there during the storm. Then the voice spoke again. Closer now. Daniel. Every muscle in his body locked instantly. Nobody out there should have known his name. The climbing continued, slowly approaching the platform. Daniel pointed his flashlight toward the stairwell. At first he saw nothing, then a pale face slowly tilted upward from the darkness below. Huge black eyes reflected the flashlight beam. Its mouth hung open impossibly wide, and it was smiling. The thing crawled onto the platform, its movements looking horribly wrong. Its limbs bent incorrectly, its fingers scraped loudly across the metal floor as it moved toward him. Daniel ran into the forest. Behind him, he could hear the thing moving through the trees overhead, not running, crawling. Hours later, he found shelter inside a small hunting cabin. An old man opened the door and listened quietly while Daniel explained everything. Finally, the old man looked into the fire and said, "That thing only comes down when somebody looks at its face." Then Daniel noticed an old photograph hanging beside the door. The picture showed the fire tower decades earlier, and standing at the very top platform was the same smiling figure staring directly into the camera. Forests have always frightened people for a reason. Not because they are empty, because sometimes they are not. And maybe that strange feeling hikers talk about is real. That sudden instinct to stop walking, to stay quiet, to listen carefully. because somewhere deep inside your brain, a part of you already knows when something is following you through the trees. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, subscribe for more true horror next week. And the next time you hear footsteps behind you on an empty trail, do not turn around too fast.